So the paper that summarizes most of this study is called Widening Spheres of Impact, the Role of Forgiveness in Marital and Family Functioning. And you can find it in the Journal of Family Psychology from a year ago, exactly a year ago. And those are my colleagues at the University of Tennessee and elsewhere now, who also worked on this study. So we talk a lot about forgiveness, but one of the main questions is, when does it come up? When do we need to forgive someone? People say forgiveness is a daily occurrence. You know, it's a minute-by-minute thing if you want your marriage to last. You gotta, you know, it's a constant thing. You gotta wake up every day and forgive, you know. So when does forgiveness even come into play? So another way to think about it is, what kinds of events constitute a betrayal? So you flip it on its head. Maybe we need to forgive betrayals. And interpersonally, in our relationships, people have called these betrayals interpersonal traumas, because the reaction to a relationship betrayal looks an awful lot like the reaction to a traumatic experience. And I'm talking post-traumatic stress here. After a betrayal, the rug has been pulled out from under them. The assumptions that they had about themselves and their partner and the way the world functions are no longer true. Their whole worldview has been compromised. And so the world becomes very unsafe. Relationship becomes very unsafe. They don't trust themselves, their own judgment anymore. And so people have written about the conceptualization of interpersonal, or of relationship betrayals, like interpersonal traumas. Because cognitively, we become completely dysfunctional. We're thinking things that are completely irrational. You know, we want to do things to that person, and whether we do them or not, you know, is another question. Emotionally, people become very erratic. They become labile. They're angry. They're sad. They're crying. They want to slash tires, that kind of stuff. And then behaviorally, you know, they might be avoiding that person. They might become preoccupied and start stalking that person. You know, people, when they experience one of these traumas, might think, act, and feel in a lot of different ways that change very quickly. It is easier to forgive an enemy than to forgive a friend, wrote William Blake. Very true. I think part of that is because when you have a friend, you have developed all of these assumptions about that friend, and that you can trust that friend. You can rely on them. And when they violate that, boy, things have really been turned on their head. Tennessee Williams once wrote, "We have to distrust each other. It's our only defense against betrayal." Well, there's a sign of relationship health right there. You know, let's have a healthy level of distrust, right? And then, because I'm speaking to a variety of tastes and interests, I've quoted Fish. Each betrayal begins with trust. How true is that, right? If you were to do a literature search on forgiveness, including some of the religious or sacred writings, as well as things you'll find in the psychological literature, you can boil it down to pretty much three basic components. When people speak about forgiveness, they are speaking about, one, achieving a more balanced view of the offender and the event, developing more compassion for that person. And that's part of the struggle. When you've been betrayed, who wants to do that, right? So that's one of the difficult tasks of the forgiveness process. The second component is decreasing negative affect toward that offender, decreasing avoidance of that offender. And what we mean by negative affect means I want to strangle them. It's those feelings of anger. I'm not thinking of anyone in particular. Those feelings of anger, grudge holding, vengefulness, those kinds of things. Being able to let go of that. Being able to actually approach the person or be in the vicinity of the other person without feeling like you just want to run and hide. And the third component is giving up that right to want to seek revenge or lash out. You've probably seen this played out in relationships. The betrayed partner wants to make the other person pay. And to restore themselves, to achieve restitution, the offender may feel like, okay, they're justified in that. And boy, I'm just thinking of all these television shows where you can see this acted out. You know, they have the right to demand these things, to seek revenge. So when you give up that right, you have achieved forgiveness. When you have given up that desire to lash out, you have achieved forgiveness. There's another concept out there in the literature which I think is more theoretical. I can't really find, I can't put my thumb on exactly where it comes from, but I hear my colleagues talking about it all the time, is the notion of simple forgivers versus complex forgivers. Simple forgivers you can think about like those people who brush it off. Yeah, I've forgiven. No big deal. I'm moving on. Under the rug. It's all nice and neat. Let's go on about our lives. Let's pretend it never happened. Meanwhile, they're scheming in their mind about how they're going to pay that person back. They're holding the grudge. They don't want to be near the other person. They're spreading rumors, whatever it is, gossiping. Complex forgivers are those who also say they have forgiven, but have gone through those 3 steps that we've talked about, or they've achieved those 3 components. So they've actually taken the time to try to understand the incident, to try to understand where the offender might have been coming from, even though they don't like it and don't accept it. They've taken the time and the energy to actually try to understand and have given up the right to lash out against that person. And when you look at those kinds of people, it refers back to some of the research I had mentioned. The simple forgivers are those, no, I'm over that. Meanwhile, their heart rate is up here, their blood pressure is elevated. Have they? Really? The people who say they have, but they endorse some of these items on a survey showing that they've worked through it, cardiovascularly, they're doing much better than the other people. So, a stage model of forgiveness has been proposed by Gordon and Balcom, and this is interesting because it's receiving empirical support out in the literature. People are studying this model and it seems to be holding up, and it also is informative in terms of clinical interventions. It's great to understand forgiveness and betrayal, but I'm a clinical psychologist. I need to know what to do with that information. What am I going to do when I have a couple sitting in front of me and they're at each other's throats because of a betrayal, or what can I do with that? So we like to break things down into stages and categories and all that. So in the first stage following a betrayal, there is emotional turmoil, cognitive upheaval about the self, the partner, the relationship, some of those assumptions I was talking about, that the world is a safe place. I can trust my partner has my best interests at heart, my partner truly loves and cares about me. Relationships are important for self-growth, all these things that we think in our relationships. People want to seek revenge and or they withdraw, and so that's what's going on immediately following a betrayal.